When I was growing up, I knew that I wanted to be a writer, so I started studying the path for how to get there very early on in my life. And when I first started querying my book, on this channel, I talk sometimes about how I've had experience in traditional publishing and in indie publishing. But another thing that sets me apart from some of the younger writers out there is that I started to look into the publishing industry right when it was on the cusp of a massive change. Indie publishing was not yet viable, and in fact, even the internet was still not quite, intertwined with publishing the way that it is now. I still had to send out a lot of my queries by postal mail and just watch my mailbox for replies. And I was still using the writer's market, like a book from the library to research agents because there weren't as many websites where you could find information about agents back then. And that was more how the publishing industry had functioned for decades. That if you wanted to be a writer, you would write a story. And if it was a short story, you would send it out to magazines by mail, and you would wait to see if you got a rejection or maybe a check. Yay! And if you were a novelist, you would send out your query letter and maybe depending on what the agent requested, 30 to 50 pages of the book to them. You would pay, dollars to send them this big packet, and then they would just send you a form rejection. So the barrier to entry was a little higher. You actually had to buy, stamps and envelopes, and in some cases larger envelopes, and actually go to the post office to mail queries out to agents. And because there was no indie publishing, or at least no really financially viable indie publishing yet, when you sent out a novel, you would have your list of agents that you could send it to. You maybe have a few smaller publishers you could send it to directly, and you knew that if it got rejected by all of those agents and publishers, you would have to shelve the book. You could rewrite it, you could send it to new agents that appear, but chances are you're going to want to just shelve that book at least for a while until you can totally remaster it or the market shifts in a big way. So a lot of authors from back in the day had many manuscripts that were just the drawer manuscripts that they had written, and they sent it out and nobody wanted it. For whatever reason, it was considered too weird or unpublishable. And we have no idea really how many great books were just rejected by the publishing industry. That isn't to say that it's really any easier to get a great book really out there, because you can indie publish it, but that doesn't mean that anybody's actually reading it. But that's another conversation. The point is, I was thinking about the idea that when I first started, it was my expectation that I would send a book out to a certain number of markets or people, and then if they didn't accept it, the book is dead. And I'm not really pining for those days exactly. That's a depressing thought that you can write a whole book and have this whole vision of a story and just have no way of getting it out there. That might have been one reason that when I was younger, I was more attracted to becoming a comic book artist, because my idol, Wendy Pini, had published an independent comic, and I had it in my head that if you were a comic creator, you could print a comic locally and maybe get your local comic shop to carry it and take it to cons and have a table and build up a small audience, and that eventually you would become a successful comic creator, which in reality barely ever happened. But I did at least have this perception that comic book creators had a little bit more of an ability to get a weird thing out into the marketplace and build an audience slowly and organically that a novelist did not have. Well, nowadays, I as a novelist do have the ability to get out my vision and get readers in a slow, organic way with something that's very personal and quirky. If you've been following this channel, you'll know that I have a story world I've been working on since I was a kid. It's gone through a ton of changes over the years, but I have never quite let go of the broad concept of it. It has evolved with me, and I love writing it. I've always just felt like it's my life's purpose, and it makes me so happy when people read those books. I wouldn't trade that for the world. But with that said, I was kind of thinking about the downside to this accessibility to building the organic audience. Like, I wouldn't argue that it's a bad thing, but is there like a bit of a dark side to it? Sometimes there is. And that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. If you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove. I am a fantasy author and I have been a working writer making money at it since 2009. I've been traditionally and indie published. I've written traditionally published YA novels. I've written paranormal romance and fairy tale romance to market, and now I'm working on The World of My Heart, The Hidden Lands, which is more fantasy than romance. But it's not always easy to market these books. I feel like the stories themselves are fairly accessible and entertaining, but they don't have a lot of those like tropes and things that really light up Book Talk and Bookstagram and BookTube. So there's a challenge to marketing it, which means that I really have to hustle to get these stories in front of people. And when I was in traditional publishing, your book kind of has a window to succeed when it first comes out. I can't remember what they would say the timeline was, but you know, let's say it's a year. You got like a year or maybe 2 years if you get like a paperback release that gives you kind of a second chance, like if you get a hardcover and then a paperback. The publisher's going to want to see results fairly quickly, and if they don't, then your book's going to go out of print probably, which has happened to most of my books, at least in the hard copy. Like now you can keep an ebook in print indefinitely, but I think all of my traditionally published books are like out of print as far as the print version goes. And in fact, one of them never even got a paperback release because the hardcover didn't perform up to expectations. And that's very common, but it means that you just don't have very long to catch the audience before it's all over. In indie publishing, meanwhile, you may hear talk about the Amazon cliffs, the 30-day cliff, the 90-day cliff. There are certain marketing things that Amazon does that give your book kind of a boost in the first 30 and 90 days that they're published. For just one example, there's the new release lists on Amazon where, you know, if you click on like a category on Amazon, let's say you're looking at romantasy. Well, you'll have the romantasy top 100, and then you'll have the new releases in romantasy. And the new releases is only going to be books that have come out in the last 90 days. So you get a little visibility by being on this list where the competition isn't quite as steep as the general list, and some readers are going to browse the new releases to see what they want to read. So there's some various little things that Amazon does that just give you more visibility in your first month to 3 months of release, along with the suspicion that they might give you kind of a bump in the algorithm when your book is new, especially if it's selling well and the algorithm's like, oh, we have a winner, which is, you know, the same on YouTube too. I mean, if I release a video and it kind of pops off, then it might become like more of a long-term performer and get a lot of views for months. But if it doesn't perform well in its first day or two, then it's not going to ever get that kind of visibility on YouTube. So there is some benefit to really promoting your release when it first comes out. But with indie publishing, there's so many different ways to get your book out there that you don't necessarily have to pay that much attention to the 30 to 90 day cliff if that doesn't really suit your personality or your marketing strategy or budget. My book, The Sorcerer's Concubine, came out in 2016, and I'm still selling copies of it on about a daily basis because I talk about it on this channel, and that's getting a regular stream of new people discovering it all the time. So I don't fuss as much over the cliffs because my personal strategy has shifted more towards talking about my books on YouTube, which is more of just a slow build strategy for building sales. And that means that I can keep promoting books forever. So you never have to give up on a book anymore, which is awesome. There are so many different channels for success and visibility. They're always evolving. You always have new chances to get your work out there. You can always be marketing. You can always be doing something new and reaching a new audience continually, decade after decade. Your books never go out of print. I don't know any author who is really complaining about this situation, but I was watching my friend Teresa's video on content creation and how the things that we create have now all become part of this blanket term, content, and it makes them feel like they're not so much like personal works of art that we crafted with our hearts and souls and minds, but are just kind of things we're tossing out there to entertain people and get visibility, fame, money, whatever it is that our brains are in it for. It's a temporary, fleeting thing rather than this passion projects that we're driven to create by some force beyond our perception. Like, when I sit down to write a novel, I want to feel like it's almost like a spiritual act and like I'm channeling something and that I'm pouring my whole soul into it. And when that becomes reduced to just content, it takes away some of the magic and the purpose of the whole thing. It gets kind of depressing. It becomes a product that I can endlessly be shilling rather than art that came from a higher place. When publishing was in its earlier form, an author did not have that much control over the marketing side of things. Your job was simply to write the book, send out the book, edit the book to the best of your ability, do any kind of promotional events that your publisher would set up, or maybe send a press release to your local newspaper or something like that. But, generally, there's not that much you could do. The success of your career, you only had so much ability to influence it. The beauty of that is that you couldn't spend too much time overthinking the marketing side of your work and how, like, you could always be doing more. Why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you getting out there right now? So Teresa's whole video, like, honestly, it kind of spoke to me.
There's nothing I love more than to traffic in words. But at that point, being on this content hamster wheel, somehow trying to appease the algorithm, I found myself hating what I used to love. It's taken something pure and it's taken something I'm passionate about. It's made me despise it. I cannot even write my own name anymore. I don't want to write anything anymore.
And it just got me thinking how there is a certain level of stress in the fact that you never have to just accept loss and failure in the modern publishing landscape. And again, I'm not necessarily wishing for a return to those days where authors had so little control over their body of work. But there have been times when I have published books, and I'm particularly thinking of the ones that were not like the absolute books of the core of my soul. They were books that were written to market, but I did enjoy them. All my books, I definitely poured some of myself into them. I don't have any that I just wrote on complete autopilot. And I have some that they kind of flopped. I'm particularly thinking about my Shifters Among Us series, which was my biggest flop ever. It was such a hideous flop that I didn't even finish the series, which I hate not doing. But I just literally could not sustain this series. I would have not had money to pay my mortgage. And I had a blast writing this series. So I really kept trying to market it longer than I should have. Like, in the back of my mind, I could kind of obviously tell the sales are horrible. They're just not there. People are just not feeling this book the way that I had hoped. I thought that it had a lot of really marketable elements, but clearly I just missed the market and it's just not selling. And I'm working so hard to market it and it's just not working. But because there's always something else you can do, I kept spending a lot of time just trying to get this book to work, just trying to find the thing. You'll hear a story sometimes where someone's like, my book didn't sell at all, and then I did this thing, and then suddenly it took off like hotcakes. And you want to cling to those stories, and they can't happen. If you really love a book, it's worth trying, if it's just something you can't let go of. But there's a lot of times where you can just tell it's not working. You should probably move on to something else. But it's so hard to just accept the failure because you just keep thinking, well, maybe the right marketing tactic is just around the corner. Or maybe I need to pay for a new cover. Yeah, it's going to be some more money, but maybe I just need to do something different with it. maybe I need to pull the book and like rework it a little. And you can just get so lost in that sense that there's always something else you can do to make this thing work, that you don't move on to the next project. And I have had books that did flop initially on release, and then I did find a way to make them work. In fact, The Sorcerer's Concubine was kind of one of those. It did all right when it first released, and then I tried Amazon ads to promote it. Amazon ads were very new at the time, so when I started using them, I got a ton of visibility because there just weren't that many books competing for the slots yet. So my book was just everywhere. Everywhere that I tried to put it, it was, and at a very low cost per click. So that really helped The Sorcerer's Concubine sell when it first came out. And in hindsight, that seems obvious. Like, of course you'd jump on Amazon ads when they were brand new and the clicks were low. But, you know, there's a reason not very many people were using them. They were unknown territory. I had to spend a lot of time like figuring out how to use them because there wasn't a lot of information on it yet because they were so new. I had to spend money to see if it would work. And I certainly didn't have a lot of that. So there was like time and money that I was spending for something that like I didn't even hardly know what I was doing. And that can be the case with a lot of marketing efforts. They suck up a lot of your time and money, and you don't know if they're going to work out. But sometimes it is worth the risk. I've also had books that I rebranded with a new cover that ended up doing much better with the new cover. It's not that you should always abandon your efforts, but there is this point where it's time to move on. It's time to try something new. And that's where I really wanted to talk about like the emotional burden for creators at this endless ability to market yourself or try a new thing. Because usually this is framed as a good thing, and I still feel that largely it is a good thing. It allows creators who might never have had a voice in the past to get out there and put themselves out there in front of the world, and some of them find an audience, sometimes a niche audience, sometimes a surprisingly large audience. It allows a bit more of like the people to decide what works. I mean, there's the algorithm, which the algorithm is people, but you know, the algorithm also sometimes pushes things that we don't necessarily really want. That's a whole other conversation, but nevertheless, there is a lot of space for niche creators, marginalized creators, all sorts of people that just like wouldn't have gotten themselves out there in the past because they wouldn't have gone past the publishing industry or, you know, insert whatever industry you're in creatively here. The emotional burden of this is that you can just feel like you're an endless failure because there are so many avenues to success, because there are so many stories you may have heard about a person who did find success doing something unconventional or trying something new. You can also torment yourself by like, why isn't that me? Why can't I figure out the secret to doing what that person did in some fashion? Why can't I find my angle, my niche, my marketing tactic? And I say this as someone who has been like reasonably successful throughout my career compared to some people, but I still have this feeling quite frequently of like, why haven't you figured this out? Why are you still stuck at this point? And I just wanted to acknowledge this as I was thinking about it, because it occurs to me like, you know, with great possibility comes a great stress and the ability to really beat yourself up. And, you know, it's not like that's a new thing. I'm sure that people who sent out their manuscript to agents and didn't get an agent, or sent out a ton of short stories and like never had a sale, had similar feelings of like, why can't I crack this market? It's not like that emotion is new. But now it feels kind of like having a 9-to-5 job versus having a job where you are on call day or night and are expected to answer all of your emails within an hour. Like it never ends. There's never an end point where you can say, well, you know, it hurts, but I tried my best and this is not the story. So I have to let it go, or I have to just continue to do this for myself rather than for an audience. when you never have a hard point where you have to accept failure, you can also make yourself absolutely crazy. So if you've ever felt these emotions, mainly I just want to say you are really not alone. Sometimes the best advice I could give a struggling fellow creative is it's okay to just let that one go. It's okay to fail. It's okay to put a book out there, not have a lot of sales. It's okay to put yourself out there and not have a lot of views and likes and comments. It is extremely common. If you feel up to it, it might be time to move on to the next project or the next thing. Try something a little new, whether it's new in your work itself or new in like the type of marketing or platform you're using. But also, if you start to get to a point where you're exhausted, it is just perfectly fine to step back from it all. The older I get, the more I'm trying to embrace the idea that it is okay to just exist. It's okay to not leave a huge mark on the world or do anything that impacts a ton of people. You would think that as this channel is growing, I would feel really good about all the people that it's reached, and I do. But with great power comes responsibility, and sometimes rather than just like embracing that idea like, wow, I feel really good about my life, I found something that really has a positive effect on a lot of people. Instead, I find myself beating myself up for times when I'm not as available or don't answer every comment or email or don't make every video that somebody requests or someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer. Like, rather than just embracing what I've done for the world and like, you know, I can't do it all, I end up feeling guilty for the things that I didn't do. And that's true for my work sometimes too. I always feel like I have this real obligation to get these stories told, even though like not many people really care. I'm the one who primarily cares, but it just feels like such a mission, and I'm trying to just kind of let some of that go sometimes and think these stories were always ultimately for you. They've always been there for you. So whether you tell them to the world or not, it's fine. They have already served their primary purpose in helping you navigate your own life and being a vehicle for me to, you know, deal with mental health issues and deal with the world and learn new things and think about things in new ways. Like, it's okay if some of my stories are only for me, if they don't reach much of an audience. That's my pep talk, maybe, for the week. I would love to know if any of you have struggled with some of this, that feeling that because success could always be around the corner, you have trouble sometimes just gracefully accepting a failure and being okay with it, which accepting failure is always difficult, but it can be especially difficult when you're never sure when you really hit the point of failure or not. When I do have time to sit and answer comments, I love the conversation. So please give me your thoughts on this topic if you have any, or any experiences you've had. If you'd like more from me, I have Patreon and a Substack, same free content on both, as well as they both have a paid tier, which gets you access to 2 bonus videos a month voted on by you guys, as well as my YouTube memberships also get you those 2 bonus videos. And all 3 of those get you access to my Discord, where we chat about some very fascinating writing and creative topics all the time. If you'd like to read any of my books, my Hidden Lands books are the fantasy novels that are so dear to my heart and are always the first ones I recommend, but my free book of the month is Tasting Gretel, very steamy retelling of Hansel and Gretel, and I must admit I did have a lot of fun writing that one. It has a little bit of a Halloween theme, so. And thank you so much for watching. If you want to catch my lives, I post every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for all your support, and I'll see you next time. Bye!